Hello. Well, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are signing in from this morning. And welcome to the Dark Reading virtual event panel. This one titled Finding and Fixing Software Vulnerabilities That Endanger Your Data. Today, this panel is sponsored by Invicti and Mend, and brought to you by Dark Reading and broadcast by Informer. My name is Dan Raywood. I'm a senior editor here at Dark Reading, and my very first event actually for Dark Reading. I've been here just over a month, so I'm really thrilled to be working on this panel, bringing this content to you today with these fantastic speakers who we've just spent the last 30 minutes. I think the synopsis is it may not look great, but it works, hence why this phone is here and this slightly blurry background behind me. Just a few points before we get going then. The slides will advance automatically throughout the next 45-minute panel. There is a download available of the slides if you'd like to take one of those. It's in the resources folders available at the bottom of your console on the left side of your slides window. It's probably recommended that you disable pop-up blockers to make sure you get the optimum experience. If you have questions for our presenters, do put them in the Q&A window. Obviously, we're really keen to hear from you and your thoughts on what we covered today. If you're experiencing technical problems, please type your issue into the Q&A text area, and we can offer assistance to you to help you get back up and running. Patch management, it's always happening. You can also hit F5 or Command R on a Mac to refresh your console. Also, at the end of the session, feel free to keep the conversation going in the group chats accessible in the zones area of the virtual event, as well as on the group chat on the webinar console. You'll have these open at the same time, and separate browser windows is recommended for that. So the panel today is on finding and fixing software vulnerabilities that endanger your data. So as well as talking about the problems of vulnerability, obviously trying to remediate those problems, what kind of issues do they lead to? I'm just going to quickly whiz through our panel, who are sitting here eagerly waiting for us to kick into this great discussion. Tonight we're joined by Shannon Leitz, by Tanya Janka, by Frank Catucci, and also by Jeanette Sherman. All their bios are available on the website if you want that. I will save us a good 10 minutes by not going through all that right now. So without further ado, let's get on to our first talking point then. So, as I said, we're going to try and cover quite a little bit today, but the first point I really want to try and get through is how do you prioritize vulnerabilities and know which ones to patch first? Because sometimes you can read a lot of blogs when, like, Microsoft patches come out, for example, and you go through it and you're like, well, which one is the right one to do first? Which one's the right one for me? So, yeah, really, we're asking for your thoughts as for an audience as well, but also we want to know about this problem as well. So how do you prioritize vulnerabilities and which to patch most immediately? Shannon, let's come to you first on that then. What's a good kind of strategy for being able to do that that tactic?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great question. After 30 plus years in this industry, punchline first. Fix scary bugs, fix those scary ones first, right? Now, let me kind of get into it. Over 30 years, we've had a lot of different prioritization capabilities that have been out. CVSS, and folks are submitting bugs for disclosure to CVE process, and we have a variety of remediation matrices and SLA policies and whatnot, right? And what I would say is the industry is still mixed on its guidance for SLA. Is it a 2-day bug? Is it a 7-day bug? What about 188 days? What is right is still something that I think the industry hasn't completely normed on or actually set a standard for. So, my experience is that elite performers within the industry actually fixed their really scary bugs within a couple of days. That means it was truly scary. And the way that they actually determined they were scary is proof of concept. They're able to do the bug creator, the folks that are actually looking for those bugs, that are disclosing bugs, have actually figured out how to replicate that bug and provide a proof of concept, and the oh crap moment happens, which means they're actually scary. Now, if you look at the way we have CVSS set up, it's really challenging sometimes to determine if things are really scary. I mean, you could actually have something with a CVE and it's a CVSS maybe 0 or 1. And is that a scary bug? Well, the answer is if it gives somebody initial access that shouldn't have it, it's probably scary. And so I think we've kind of taken a little bit of the intuition and the decision making out of the process by putting these matrices and these norms in place that still we actually don't agree on as an industry. My perspective is fix the scary stuff first, and then worry about the other things that actually could eventually become scary, but haven't really gotten all the priority from adversaries that are in line.
Yeah, I think what you're saying here, active exploits are incredibly important, and also it's really important to realize that just because you're using it, just because you're using a library that has that vulnerability, it also doesn't necessarily mean that that is reachable, right? And so it's one of those things that you have to think a little bit. You have to think it through. You can't just use, like you're saying, just use the scores. You have to take some of these things into account. You have to take known exploits into account. You have to take reachability into account, because in the same way that something that's a 0 might need attention, something that's got a really high score might not need the attention, and you might be sending people on kind of a wild goose chase without a lot of expected, return from that, without a lot of added security benefits. So I think that's, it's definitely important to look beyond the score. And I think sometimes the scores, the numbers can get scary, but people have a hard time understanding how to translate the number into action.
May I add on to that? Because I feel like if we can add context to this, you can have even richer prioritization. Like, is this app or API public facing, or is it internal only? Is there super sensitive data in it, or is it all, non-confidential, publicly available data? Is it one of our mission critical, and like, if this goes down, we can't do business apps? Or is it an app that like tells us which lunchtime special is happening? And so like when we add those things on too, plus everything that Jeanette said and Shannon said, I feel like we could have a really good prioritization going.
I agree.
Right, and you have to have some automation steps to cover it that way with all those complexities, right?
Frank?
Yeah. I think Tanya added a key component here, and that's that asset classification and understanding where your sensitive data or your sensitive applications live, and then understanding how they're built. Right now, the automation piece is another a key component of that. So let's say that something comes out where you have this vulnerability in a component that's found. Well, that component, it's not exploitable, or it's not reachable, or it's not being called or utilized. You might put that further down to 2 other lower type of vulnerabilities that can be chained together to form an attack that really works in that context on an asset that has that exposure. So really understanding your asset inventory, your data classifications of where the sensitive data lives, where those apps are, where the apps exposures are, or the API exposures are, and then understanding exactly how that app is put together and functioning to know if that component or that vulnerability actually is going to have an impact in your systems with access. So I think all of these pieces put together, and knowing your app configurations, knowing how they're built, knowing how they work, and how the configurations talk to each other, and data via API is all going to help you and make a better educated decision on which ones to tackle first or concentrate on, with letting a lot of that other noise kind of subset to the background until after you can fix those key components.
And I'm going to build on that, which is, if you're in the security team, don't be afraid to leverage the developer, the engineer who actually runs the systems to engage with that information from vulnerability scanners. If you have them, that's what you're getting the information from, don't be afraid to really send that information out and leverage what the folks are that have the context for it, right? And so I think we have to actually start thinking about, why are we holding back and making those decisions as security professionals? If you're a developer, you shouldn't have a 0 part in this perspective, right? You need to be involved. You have to participate. It's unlikely there are 0 defects for your system, just to be clear. Like, you should be thinking about what percentage of my time should be going to security hygiene and defect resolution. And if you aren't participating, if you have a 0 part in this, I would say change that, because that's what's really going to help to create the resilience in your environment.
Yeah, I was going to throw a point back in, actually. I hope you can hear me. I think really interesting comments so far. And I think, Frank, what you were saying there about, asset inventory, we've seen so much talk about that over the past few years. We've seen companies emerge who offer that as a service now, essentially, as their product. is that kind of knowing what you've got. You know, we've been talking a long time about cloud servers. Do you know what you've got? And then it's like, actually, do you know what's got within your own perimeter? What about like a sort of a more, we're going to get onto sort of like the more immediate vulnerabilities in about 5 minutes or so. But let's say something comes out and it is, like there was a thing we wrote about on Dark Reading this week, like a Schneider vulnerability 8.8 CVSS so 3.1, whichever one it was. But 8.8, you know, that's, I know you talked to Chandler, you know, about the numbers and all that. But, you know, Frank, just to come back to you first, is that sort of thing, that might sort of think, how do I not do that first? You know, that not sort of jump out to me? When that sort of immediate, you know, that I must do this critical 0-day patch right now, or, you know, everything goes wrong. Is that not a little bit of that sort of fear factor kind of come into play?
Yes. I think, well, in the example you gave, in something like industrial control or critical infrastructure like that, there's going to be a couple of different things that play factor there. One is to know that obviously that's probably one of the more critical pieces of your infrastructure and the most sensitive. So that's going to automatically take priority. The other piece of that is that those patches may or may not be available or as easy to fix as other vulnerabilities in more modern frameworks and software. So you have to look at two things there. There could be some mitigating factors or mitigating steps on those type of systems that you may have to put in place until a patch or a patch window, dependent on the sensitivity of that control structure, can be patched. Or you might have to definitely concentrate on that if you do have the flexibility of a backup system or something like that you can use. So those I would say those more industrial control type of systems or critical kind of system infrastructure like that, when you're talking about Schneider and those type of products, have a little bit of unique consideration, but they would definitely be in that top priority for criticality in your you know, asset inventory, if you will. That's my opinion.
Well, that's good. No, I appreciate that. That's really good. And I think it's the other thing I want to quickly cover, and maybe Tanya, I'll just come to you for this one, is when it comes to prioritization. You know, okay, I'm just going to say, how many people are still using spreadsheets for vulnerability management and things like that, an Excel spreadsheet? Do you see that still as kind of a common theme?
Yes, it's extremely common. I joke that Microsoft Excel is the first browser, and then Microsoft Excel best hacker tools, because yeah, you track a lot of stuff. There are a lot of risk registers in Microsoft Excel, and if I can add on slightly to what Frank said, I find it surprising sometimes how executives will freak out and be like, there's this 0-day in like struts to blah, and we need to like, our hair's on fire. And I'm like, struts is a very problematic framework. So we have tons and tons and tons of vulnerabilities in it. And like, they'll tell me to like prioritize being able to respond to things like that over fixing our like years worth of technical security debt, and like putting into practice like ways where we can release security fixes faster. Like, I'm like, what if we could release a security fix in less than 180 days? Like, I remember working somewhere and it was an 18-month patch cycle. 18 months to get a security fix. I kid you not, because they had this very strict waterfall. And they were like, we need to be able to fix 0 days in like an hour. And I was like, you need to, like, when I scan your apps, I cry on the inside. Like, this is not our number one priority. And they kept freaking out about that and not all the tons of things I kept telling them about. So I feel like, I don't know, like Log4j was very serious, SolarWinds was very, very serious, and so was Struts. But other than those three, like the rest of them, I'm like, we should do something about it. But let's not stop all our other AppSec activities for 3 months to do something about it. Or what if we prepare for that by making sure we have a really fast release cycle where we've automated as much as possible? I feel like there's sensationalization in the media around these things. Or maybe I just think that. What does everyone else think?
No, I mean, you know, you're going to, especially if it has a logo, right? I mean, it's going to get that attention. Right?
Always. You know, Frank brought up a really good point about information that's available and how to actually prioritize. I think, you know, adding on to that, that information in the hands of the right people, thinking about your security budget, if you will. One of the things that, I'm starting to see in the industry is this notion of a security budget. Is it 20% of your time, like full day? Actually, there's a lot of bugs, legacy issues. Or is it a brand new modern software platform and really you only need a 1% security budget because nobody's even found those bugs yet, and you're just going to be on surprise and alarm all the time. And I think it's important to realize that Frank's got a really great point about asset information and making sure that you understand what your security budget and debt is going to be, so you can actually start to think about how you're going to pay it back over time. And I think that's why we all cry inside with this, is that at some point we've got to really figure out what is that debt that we're actually bringing on. Is the debt increasing over time? And that's a really bad metric. If you're starting to see flatlining and you're actually bringing your debt under control, or it's going the opposite direction, then you're really leveraging your systems in the right way. And I think these tools that have a lot of depth of information should be something that we can start to leverage as a repository and bring that information to bear as decision makers.
I actually sometimes talk to people when I talk about security debt and say that security debt is like regular debt because interest accrues. And it's because of what we were talking about earlier, where sometimes having one vulnerability, that might not have hurt you, that might not have led to a big exploit. As you start to accumulate more and more out-of-date software, so everybody's heard about the LastPass breach. Everybody's heard about that. The version of Plex, which was the software that the breach was done through, that was a 75 version old copy of Plex. It was years out of date. And one of the interesting things about the way that these things are covered, they should teach us stories about human nature a little bit. This is a lot of why it's actually really important to have your application security, to think about it really early on when you're building the software, because once you get it out there in the wild, not everybody is going to be patching it the way that they should, right? Like, people don't actually have that level of responsiveness that we wish that they did. Sometimes it's because it's tricky. Sometimes it's because people just get lazy, right? And we know this. And what we see in the news, actually, I think sometimes we take the wrong lessons out of it, right? Because we chase something like a chicken with our head cut off, and we should learn a lesson like, don't count on people to update even if their software is 75 versions old.
Yeah. Hacking like it's 1999 because it still works. Gotcha. Yeah.
So terribly true.
Yeah, well, we have touched on this quite briefly. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say one more point. If you have a sprint with zero security investment in it, like you didn't actually check your patches, you didn't look at a report, you didn't put any effort in, that should be a sprint where you're actually concerned. That should be a scary sprint, because there is security work to be done on every sprint, and we should be thinking about that.
Well, I just wanted to quickly throw in, we talked about the sort of the media response. I've been on cybersecurity media now for almost 15 years, so I blame people like myself. But, bugs do get hyped up. There was one which I can't remember the name of, but I know it was sort of pre-released, like Frank said, with a logo before we'd even got the bug. And I think when it came out, I honestly can't remember what it was called, but it was probably about 2015, something like that. And it was, kind of one of the examples of this things went bad. But the one I often cite is Heartbleed, which I'm going to guess was about 24, I think it was 13, 14, one of the two. I know where I was working at the time. That obviously had the logo, but that was pretty... Well, actually, I'll ask you, and Jeanette, let's maybe come to you first. Was that severe enough to sort of warrant the press attention that it got?
Well, look, it's not necessarily. Look, I'm going to take a stance that's a little bit opposed to Tanya's stance, because I hear the annoyance about the media stuff, and I totally get it. And sometimes you can be like, well, why is this? Why is that going to be more important than the 1,000 other issues that you have with your software? Maybe it's not. But sometimes, and this is something I believe about the media in general. So I was a journalist for years and years as well in my very early career. And sometimes you have to pick an example story to make a trend clear to people who need to hear about it. And I think sometimes what's really happening with these stories, even if executives don't always take the exact right lesson from it, just the idea that application security is important and that you need to secure the application layer, that's something, right? At least now, because there are these moments and these stories, you can now refer to the executive back to things like, hey, remember Log4j, right? And they all do. They all remember Log4j. If there weren't these kind of things that froth up to the top and become these big stories, we wouldn't be able to as easily, I think, get executive support for big initiatives that need to happen and are going to deal with a lot more, right, than the big hard-hitting news element ones. But one of the things I think becomes clear about, and as you read stories is about breaches, it doesn't matter how many eyes are on your company, and it doesn't matter how important what your company does, you are still going to have vulnerabilities. You are still going to see attacks. You're going to see those vulnerabilities exploited. I was thinking about ChatGPT, which they made a change. They started using an open source library. That open source library had a vulnerability. All of a sudden, people were seeing each other's chats to ChatGPT. And sometimes people actually say things they probably shouldn't say, to something that's listening. And they were suddenly saying it to people they didn't intend to. And all eyes are on ChatGPT. Everybody's looking at it. And yet, even with all eyes looking at it, even with, all the funding and all of the growth in the world, this kind of stuff is still happening. And I think that should point executives to something too, which is focusing on this isn't saying we have a janky system, we have a system that isn't working. No, it's just part of doing business in the 21st century.
Yeah, I need to jump in there. So I would agree with everything that Jeanette said. And again, I'm more opposed to, sometimes these things get blown up in the media for other reasons other than just exposure. However, in the specific question that you asked, Dan, about Heartbleed, just this past few months ago, I did a deep dive into OpenSSL talk at OWASP in Dublin. And during this, it was really part of the point I was trying to hit home was the latest OpenSSL bug that came out got labeled critical. And it was not critical. It got downgraded to high, which is still crazy. I think it should have been about a medium. But the fact of the matter is that everybody thought this was going to be that next Heartbleed. And to address your question specifically, in that case, the media, the coverage, the logos, everything was 100% justified in the Heartbleed attack. We were talking about getting basically plain text information from a session that was happening on any SSL application, e-commerce, etc., that was obtainable in an automated fashion through a script to just keep sending these requests over to a SSL server and then be able to get the stuff back in plain text from that session. So when this broke, I was doing some consulting work at one of the largest home retailers in the US, and we got pulled into the boardroom. We tried the POC, and we were actually pulling live transactional data from their e-commerce site in plain text from a hotspot. So, that was one that was extremely justified. But I think it also sets a precedent that anytime something gets launched like that, it may have that same attention, even though it doesn't deserve it. So it does take that context and that expertise to be able to sift through the things that you're seeing and identify and separate the sensationalism versus the realism. Heartbleed, 100% justified and real, whereas some of them, not so much. So that's my take. There's always some truth in there when you look at something as severe as Heartbleed, but it can be exaggerated in a lot of other cases. So it does take that context to know the difference.
I think that goes back to my point about fix the scary ones first, the ones that are provable, that you get a POC for, that you're starting to really understand, oh, wow, I'm actually seeing something I shouldn't be seeing, and this is truly scary, right? Versus, hey, I can't necessarily reproduce this to do anything. It's a bug that seems like it still needs to mature. Those have a little bit more time because it still takes hacker motivation, adversary motivation to go convert those into something useful. And I think this goes back to, do we have the systems in place to fully provide our research for figuring out which ones are scary? Are we actually, creating processes in our programs to be able to figure out from those resources whether or not something is scary? And then are we actually prioritizing those into our security hygiene so that every sprint includes fix the worst things first and then basically carve away at your backlog? If there isn't anything truly scary, you should still have a security budget that you're working against in those sprints, regardless.
Absolutely.
So I like a lot of what everyone said. I feel like, so sometimes the media, like Frank was saying, sometimes the media pumps things up that don't need to be that pumped up. And everyone kind of freaks out and flips out and just does stuff. Like, I don't know if you remember Spectre and Meltdown, which also both had their own logos, etc. And, Microsoft worked really hard to release all these patches right away, and the patches hurt more than the vulnerability did, right? And so when we freak everyone out and get everyone really excited and tell them, you have to do this right now or the sky will fall, we can end up with accidentally making things worse. And I feel like, yes, like definitely Shannon, like figuring out what the scary things are that we need to fix and looking at our specific threat model. So I remember saying to someone like, yeah, we should do the patches for Spectre and Meltdown as soon as they're more solid and they're not going to knock us over. And they're like, no, everyone has to do them now. I'm like, our threat model doesn't include nation states. Our threat model doesn't include like advanced threat actors. We just have to worry about dumb script kiddies. And if there's no like item for it in Metasploit, there's no module, there's no button that they can press, I'm not as worried about, like, they don't have 7 PhDs that are willing to work a year to try to exploit us. And so like having a not scared out of your mind discussion with the C-levels where you can explain the risks as you believe them to be clearly is important. And also having the ability to perform a virtual patch. So like whether you're behind a CDN, like a content delivery network, a WAF, or like a RASP, which one you choose, it doesn't matter. But having something like that, then you can create a regex to block every proof of concept you find on the dark web or pspin or wherever. And then it's like, we have some time that we can fix this and do it safely and test properly. Because I've seen so many people in a panic and they're freaking out because the executives are screaming and everyone's yelling. And they're like, okay, I'll just patch and throw it into prod. And then like we knock down production or we do something else that's bad, right? And so if we can give ourselves some breathing space by releasing some sort of virtual patch, and I believe during Log4j, a bunch of the content delivery networks and WAF, they're just like, we're just applying this for you. You're thank you, or you're welcome. And so I feel like the industry could respond in a way where we support it. Like I remember during Log4j, some of the SCA tools sent out an email saying, hey, just so you know, you have this. This is what we suggest you do for now. And we will update you when there is a patch available. I was like, yes, calmness. But I also think that sometimes the main threat to fixing bugs is the security team, because we have 27 different steps we want them to do in the change management process, which is all waiting on us and meetings and this and that. And sometimes when we have one of these big events, instead of just using it to try to get to hire more security staff, we could use it to like figure out a system where we can do a virtual patch so we're ready for next time and work on making our patch management process like not complete hell. And so if we can release a patch in like 3 hours instead of 3 weeks, we are way ahead for the next time, because something like this will continue to happen, unfortunately, until our industry starts to actually take responsibility for all the open source we use, which I have many thoughts on, but for later, because I don't want to, we only have like so much time in the day.
Yeah, I think these are some terrific points. I think it's really interesting. Yeah, sorry, I'll come back to you in a second. But yeah, I think just from my perspective, it's that sky is falling thing. It creates headlines, right? And we were there for WannaCry and we saw the problems that were caused. Actually, I just had a comment I should say from Dario. Critical is only relative to your environment. It's better that everyone is warned. The sky is falling can alert. Sorry, excuse me. Try again. The sky is falling can cause alert fatigue. It keeps us employed as to using our real intelligence versus AI. That sky is falling. Tanya, let's just stick with you for a second on that. It can create alert fatigue. That's something we've heard about, of course. In stock analysts, and I don't think any of you, I don't know what all your backgrounds are, but I'm sure I don't know if you've any experience of stock work. But Is that a genuine thing? All these things are going on. How do you pick out the genuine ones that can endanger your data versus other ones?
Okay, so sorry.
Oh, go
Jen,
ahead.
do you want to go first? So I have spent a lot of time in the past couple of years ripping out older AppSec tools and putting in newer AppSec tools. And just saying, like, this is not the best tool for the job. And not because it's this brand or from that company, but just it's not meeting us at the speed that our devs want to work, or the accuracy level is too low, or it's not, like, we can't get the context based on the way it works. And I've also spent a lot of time doing, so like I'm excited about the new ASOC tools, like application security orchestration and correlation, but it's just basically super fancy analytics. Like, yes. And then I can tell you, oh, this is public facing or not, or, oh, it's got the check mark that needs to be PCI compliant, or whatever the things are. And you can automate it to show you a bunch of stuff. And you can have it suck up the results of all your tools so it can be updated like by the hour, and even if you're really wild, by the minute. And so I've worked with companies where their SAST is telling them, oh, there's 48,000 vulnerabilities in this one app, and it's mostly false positives. And like, I don't want to spend the next year validating this crap. I have work to do. And so I feel like some of it is modernization, and like we could just do a lot better if we rip out some things. I'm sorry if I got a little off track there, but I feel like I see a lot of companies where they're like, this is marketed the most, so I have to have one of these, or I have to have this one because I've heard of this company, and the company might be totally awesome. And maybe 10 years ago, they had the best tool ever, but I'm seeing like a combination of a couple of different things that can feed off of each other. Sometimes you can get better results. And then of course, like making sure that when the developers are exposed to these tools, it doesn't feel like you're petting a cat backwards really, really hard all day long and just annoying and ruining all their processes and ticking them off. Shannon, what do you
I'm gonna actually push on some of this a little bit. So one of the most interesting things that I learned a while back was very few people actually go into these tools that have 48,000, and I'm gonna say millions of security alerts. And when we say alert fatigue, we actually think about things in a really strange way, that if something doesn't come out with the answer, we have alert fatigue. And I think that some of the value we can provide as security professionals is log into the tool and start clicking on false positive, false positive. If that's what your tool requires you to do, that's the process that you actually bought into, and you're not willing to do that work, then that's the wrong tool. And why did you pick it in the first place? And I think we have this problem of the tools themselves are actually providing what is required, and we're buying into these tools, but then not actually logging in. One of the things that I used to do is, all right, well, if we bought this tool and they require somebody to log in and actually look at something, I guess I'm going to go in there and do it. And so it was interesting because at one point, I think I knocked over 1 million bugs that were all false positives just by going in and going, does this actually reproduce? Oh, let me try this, right? And just the simplicity of going and trying and realizing, oh, this doesn't reproduce. In fact, like that doesn't even work at all. And then click and 1 million bugs just disappear. So I really feel like one of the challenges we have as an industry is if not us with all the skills, who? Are we going to really send our developers in there and they're going to have to actually go and do that? I think it's our job. And again, I think that we have to raise the bar on the tool providers that like, why are you sending me something that has 1 million bugs? When in reality, like that didn't produce in the first place. Your test actually failed to create the right level of a true positive or a true negative. And I really feel like our challenge as an industry is we got to go basically work on test plans, figure out what is being tested. Is it a true match? When we're actually working with something, are we providing them the information to fix a true issue? And that means that the tools themselves have to actually get better and better, and that we need to really actually be disgruntled about when we log into a tool and go back to the vendor and say, hey, by the way, I logged into this tool, this particular test failed, here's why it failed, here's what you didn't do in that test, here's why it is a false positive, and can you actually go into your test and fix it? Because the test itself is actually flawed. Like, I don't actually know anybody yet who's going through their test plans and figuring out if the test itself is actually been tested for producing the right result.
I like
That's
what
it.
you're saying. I need to come at this from a little. I'm going to come at this from a little bit of a controversial angle too.
Sure.
Now, I don't disagree that we need to push on the vendors, especially those that don't modernize in their approaches for these type of things. But at the same time, I have a mantra that I've been using for the past 20 years, and that's that training trumps tools. We need the tools. Tools are important. But I feel like we're failing our people. I feel like we're failing our people in the proper training and understanding of exactly what they should be looking at, what they should be buying, why should they be buying these things. Are they going to need tools? 100%, right? You're not going to do this without a tool. I don't care if the tool is open source. I don't care if it costs $1 million for one license. You're going to need a tool. But you need that expertise to understand what that tool should be doing and what the right tool is for you. That's where I see a major gap. What might work for one company over here, it might be the perfect fit that is like these three companies' tools. And then this company over here might be a completely separate set of tools dependent on their software. So I think the training needs to be done. I think the people investment needs to be done. And then, yes, the tools need to be implemented. And if you are going to implement the tools, I think it's inevitable that you're going to have to rely heavily on integration and automation with APIs and things that integrate the systems and your automation tools that already exist. We can talk all day about the shift left or shift right or shift this. It's not really shift, right? It's more of like understanding where these processes are being automated, understanding that this is a culture that has moved software shops to be more developer centric. They have more on their shoulders, more pressure on them as developers, and then enable them with tools and process, and enable the security folks also to understand what's going to work best and automate those processes without all of that constant noise and alert fatigue. So yes, you need to push on your vendor and never stop, but at the same time, you have to look at yourself in the mirror too to understand if you're understanding what you're even asking for, what that process should look like if you're shooting for maturity versus where I'm starting out entry level.
And I think we agree, Frank. So I actually think we agree with the training proposition. What I'm saying is, wouldn't you like somebody who's going to be actively participating with your tool? Because that means they are going to be learning, and maybe training happens with a couple of hours where they're actually learning the tool. But the engagement with that tool is actually what creates the true skill and the expertise that allows for that tool to get better, for the vendor partner relationship that has to take place. And I'm saying that on the practitioner side is where I'm not seeing folks actually logging into the tools, taking the initial 2-hour training, figuring out what the tool actually does. They install the sucker, turn it on, and it pumps out a whole bunch of information, and it's not getting tuned for that environment. I really do think it's, when I say go back to your vendor and push on them, I'm saying that still requires that practitioner to go in and actually work with that tool to be able to have that conversation to push on that vendor. So I think we're in total violent agreement.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
I do think though that it's not just a matter of, people aren't being as proactive as they should be. That's part of it. But I also think, look, devs are smart and they're overworked, and they have to put their time into something that they think is going to pay out, essentially. And the biggest way that this kind of software, the AppSec software, becomes shelfware is alert fatigue, right? And it's not always, and this is something I think we need to remember when people, they install it and then they never even try to use it, is that it might not be their first rodeo, right? They may have worked with a tool that gave them a bad impression, that left a bad taste in their mouth, and they're like, you know what, for me, this is now a box ticking exercise. And we as vendors need to be able to talk to people and say, look, we're not going to waste your time in that way. We are working really hard on this problem so that when we tell you something needs you to pay attention to it, we actually mean it. And that's part of the responsibility that vendors need to take on in this next generation of AppSec tools.
I'm hoping to see vendors give a lot more training on their products as well. Because a thing when I moved into AppSec that I found really surprising is that we would pay $500,000 for a tool, and then they would tell us they want 50,000 more if they're going to teach us how to use it. And I'm like, what? I didn't budget for that.
It's crazy.
Or even 100,000 or 50,000. I'm like, no, but, and then I'm just like, so I'm hoping that the tool makers are going to start giving like more content and more training so that we can leave all of our AppSec people and our devs to feel empowered. And even with the devs, if it's just being able to read the remediation advice and it actually making sense, or the AppSec person being able to like drive it and deploy it in a great way. Because I've seen some great tools deployed poorly, even by me. And when you deploy them properly, you get way better results. And so I've learned some hard lessons from not having training.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to?
All right, fantastic. We've got about. Oh, sorry. Look, I'm quickly going to say we've got about 3 minutes before I need to wrap up. So I need to throw to someone just to kind of give us a bit of a closing thought. And I don't want to get all four of you because we'll run over. So I don't know who was just about to speak then. I think it might have been Shannon.
Yeah, that was me. Uh-oh. Do I get the ringer? There's a parting shot.
I wasn't going to throw to Jeanette, so why don't we get a minute
pressure.
from you, Jen? Just kind of looking at the overall discussion, fixing software vulnerabilities. What's a kind of good step forward for someone listening to this who's going to go like, Friday morning or maybe at the start of their day, their Pacific time or whatever? What's kind of a good step forward for them to take if somebody listening to going, okay, what do I need to do things better?
I'd say log into your tools and start tuning them because you're going to find so much information. You're going to be able to pull a whole bunch of detail out. You're going to be able to find the scary bugs. You're going to be able to leverage the information. You might even learn a little bit about your asset profiles. And I think it's really important that we participate in the process because what we're actually defining, all of us care deeply. The developers care deeply. And again, going back to alert, confusion and, the congestion that gets led to it, I think we really have to figure out as an industry, how do we really tune this information, get to great test plans? I would love to start to see scorecards where they're actually green, like something got tested and it's actually working effectively and it's starting to get green, right? Instead of all these like red little dots everywhere because everything's just failing. It is entirely possible that you can say, look, I'm not going to fix track and trace. Let's stop doing that. We know it's going to fail. That's on the little red board. But there's actually an ability for us to define test plans and leverage our asset profiles to know, look, I've tested all the major things in this particular asset profile. And going back to something that Tanya was saying, I think it's really important that we actually have an adversary scorecard for this. Are we dealing with script kiddies? If it's script kiddie easy, it's actually super scary. If it's going to require nation state, it's scary still, but like those folks have billions of dollars and you're probably going to end up having to deal with things differently. So to me, having the right balance of metrics and information and leveraging it and really participating in this activity can truly make a dent. We have security budgets and security hygiene to think about. Again, I'm going to say one last thing. If there is a sprint happening with no security investment and no security work in it, you're probably doing it wrong.
Awesome. Jeanette, I come to you. Just get a very quick quick finish from you. Anything else you'd add to that?
I think that what is really important in picking an AppSec tool is picking something that you're going to be able to build it in, where it doesn't necessarily require as much buy-in and as much proactive work. I think one thing that we're all familiar with is that when everything relies on people being proactive, you're actually saying that you're relying on your least proactive person, right? Because that's where the problems start to come in. And so, building these tools into your development gates is really, really critical, making sure that the scans actually happen and that they're where devs can see them and where they will get some attention. That's what's really very important because, you can't expect every single dev to buy in, not when some of them have been burned before.
All right, fantastic. Unfortunately, just for time, we are going to have to wrap up there because we've got literally 1 minute left. I think we could go on for another half an hour at least on this with the speakers. I think this has been a really, really great discussion. So again, thanks, huge thanks to Tanya, Shannon, Frank, and to Jeanette for their time today and for joining us for this discussion. I hope it was very valuable to you as well. It's going to be available in the next 24 hours. You'll get a personalized follow-up email with details and links to today's virtual event presentations, which will be on demand, so you can go and watch this all over again and enjoy it just twice as much, I hope. This session was sponsored by Invicti and Men, presented by Dark Reading and brought to you by Informa. This session is copyright 2023 by Informa. Presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by Dark Reading, and individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinion. So everything said is down to them. You can check out the topic-specific zone areas where there are plenty of resources that align with what we've discussed today, and experts standing by to chat with you too. Up next in the virtual event is our second panel of the day, how attackers target today's hybrid endpoints, sponsored by Cardinal Apps and Delinea. You can find these sessions in the virtual event auditorium. So on behalf of our four speakers today and myself, Dan Ray, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the virtual event in a moment. Thanks for joining us.